I don't know what your views of Bursa are. Typically, it's someone who's bombastic, self-important, no sense of humour. So I'll do what I can over the next 25 minutes to reinforce the stereotype. So Colin mentioned that a lot of the independent schools are curators of national assets, and certainly Brighton College is one of those curators. We have Victorian red brick, flint and terracotta interior, beautiful roof landscapes with gable ends, and it's a far cry from the school that I grew up in, which was a 1970s concrete flat-roofed building with no personality at all. It was a tough school. The first game that we learned in the playground was pin the blame on the donkey. And we also, by the time we got to secondary school, there were a number of drug abusers, and they were all put into one form, Class A. By way of background, about 7 years ago, Brighton College was generating a surplus of about £300,000, which isn't really enough to do anything with. It's not enough to look after the estate, let alone invest in it. Now, 7 years later, we're putting up a building every year, costing somewhere between £1.5 million and £8 million, depending on the scale of the building. And what I'd like to do is just have a little chat today about how we've managed to achieve that and how we are going about determining what buildings we're putting and where. So without further ado, I'll move on to the strategy. This is about strategic planning. And for me, the strategy comes down to two things, although I put three up, two things. One is, what's the vision? And the second thing is, how do you deliver it? And the delivery of the vision it surrounds two things: having the financial wherewithal and also having the people and the processes to deliver it. And what Brighton College has been very good at is both determining a vision for itself and also, in more recent years, creating the finance and the teams to deliver the vision. You can see here that the original architectural vision is on the left. Vision and finance aren't always easy bedfellows. You can see what we ended up with as the entrance on the right. I don't know if any of you have spotted the difference. I'll give you a clue. There's a huge tower missing, and that gives you some illustration, in fact, of how Brighton College has operated really since up until the present day, with always its financial constraints compromising its vision. For us, the vision is twofold. The first is around pupils. I mean, I don't know, you'll recognise this. When you get up at 5:30 in the morning to come to a conference, you can be forgiven for going into a London cafe en route and just grabbing one of these to keep you awake. This is a fairly standard drink. Everyone knows what they're going to get. There's nothing magical about it, but at least it does the job. What we are about is taking children and trying to make them into the best they are. We do not want children that come out in a uniform form. What we are about is looking at what they're capable of and trying to tailor our education to ensure that each of those children is driven in a way that they can be the best they are. We do not want doppelgangers of others. We obviously want them to be able to go on to the universities of their choice, and so academic achievement is paramount in that as well. But someone, I think, referred earlier to the curiosity, confidence, kindness sort of aspect about what it is we should be putting into our children as we educate them. That is certainly what we are about. It is not arrogance, it is confidence, but with kindness, and those are very important traits. And so, revisiting Sir Colin's comment about the independent school community looking after national assets, it's not just the buildings and the landscape, it is about the pupils as well. Our children are our national assets, and our vision starts with them. Around those children, we build a vision for our school, and part of the vision is ensuring that the school provides the necessary capacity, the balance, age, gender mix, boarding day, and so on. But also we want our teachers to be the best teachers and our facilities to be the best facilities. And as we are going around the world and looking at new locations, we're opening schools overseas, I'll come on to that in a minute, what I am seeing as I go around the world is that the UK is lagging in some areas the best facilities. And what we are giving our children in the UK is not the right education that will equip them for the world ahead. We need to make certain that we drive that sort of agenda here in the UK. I've highlighted, because this is a gathering focusing on architecture and infrastructure, I've highlighted on this slide those areas that I think architecture and infrastructure really influence in the school. For me, it's been an eye-opener. I joined the school 4 years ago. Prior to that, I used to buy and sell businesses with an international accountancy firm, KPMG. So I joined the educational profession 4 years ago, and I hadn't really put the connection between buildings and environment and education together. But it's clear from the buildings we've been putting up that they lift the morale, they lift the confidence, they aid with pupil recruitment, they aid with teacher recruitment, and for me, therefore, the architecture is integral to delivery of the vision that we have at Brighton College. That was the vision. I think I'll just turn my attention now to the finances. You'll recall I said we weren't earning a huge amount historically. We've tried to address that. What measures did we use to address that? Well, the first, of course, is the demand driver. We wanted to get as many pupils as we could to see Brighton College as a destination for learning, and as many parents as possible to buy into that. So we tried to make it as easy as possible to attract people. Part of that was around improving our academic results, and there was a change in the common room and the teaching that was carried out under the existing headmaster, Richard Cairns, to address the academic performance of the school. We also recognised that as the economy was getting harder, that parents might delay coming into schools a little longer, and so we created a specific 11+ entry point with creating a new school, and I'll come on to that in a second. For pupils, we recognise that actually, certainly the 13 and 16-year-olds, they choose their schools alongside their parents, and what they like to buy into is the fact that we're coastal, we're urban, we're cosmopolitan, the environment was critical to them, and so we needed to cater for those dynamics as well, and offer not just academic performance, but actually a very, very detailed co-curricular programme, one that really works alongside the academic performance. And what's interesting is the more time we invest in the sports, the music, the dance, the drama, and the less we invest in the academic side, the better the performance of the children, which suggests the balanced agenda is actually far more beneficial than sweating children in classrooms, which is what I'm also seeing as I go around the world. And you can see from this that our academic results currently are well above the national average. It's already been referred to by Jay. I don't know if we're in the top 5. We're certainly in the top 2 co-educational schools in the country, and have been, I think, for the last 3 or 4 years, and we've improved year on year, every year for the last 6 years, which I think makes us the only school to have done so. We had the Independent School of the Year award for that, in recognition of that last year. And that's helped underpin this demand for places, and you can see here the rapid growth in pupil numbers over the last few years as a result of us focusing on the infrastructure and on those other drivers I've talked about, academic performance being one of them. So that was part of the financial strategy. If you get the demand right, you'll get the pupils in. But the second thing, of course, is that you need to ensure that actually something falls out of the bottom of all of that. Naturally, that's cash. So when I arrived, which was 4 years ago, I turned my attention to the surpluses of the college. And at the point I arrived, which is 2009, we were generating around about a 12% operational surplus. That's EBITDA, that's adding depreciation back, for those of you that understand such things. And that's actually not a bad return, 12%, but it masked the fact that 8% was really being generated. That's the blue line. 8% was being generated by the college's actual activities. 4% was donations, which you couldn't rely on. And I was not particularly happy with that. And so I instigated a series of measures which looked at a number of areas. And you can see that the resulting impact of that, combined with the increase in demand, I have to add, enables us now to generate returns of over 20% and 30% if you add donation income on top of that. So we focused on donation strategy as one of those areas, but also looking at the core business. As a result of that, we celebrated, and this is not a young Indiana Jones, as you might think. This is actually me, and what I'm doing here, I'm supporting the college. Brighton Best is a relatively new beer that's come on the market. It's produced by a relatively new brewery, W.J. King. It's owned by one of the parents at the school, and so here I am actually paying school fees vicariously. The next thing we had to ensure was that any surpluses we generated did actually result in cash, and you can see here the blue bar is the surplus and the red bar is the cash that's been generated. Typically they would work broadly together. the changes from one year to the next will be around working capital movements at the year end. And since we've put in some measures around cash as well, this is the result. And we've gone from generating £1 to £1.5 million cash a year to generating somewhere between £6 and £8 million. Some of that's to do with non-core business and generating other income streams, and some of that is to do with running a school very efficiently. And it's this that is enabling us to invest in facilities. And so we had a party, and as a result, the surplus next year will be a lot lower. I have 3 children. My 10-year-old thinks that I'm cool because this is my Facebook photo. This is, by contrast, a source of great embarrassment to my 14-year-old, and my 6-year-old just wondered how I got to balance the butterfly on my neck. So, having generated the financials that enabled us to invest in the college, we then had to think about what is it we invest in. And the campus is the first thing we wanted to focus on because we wanted the facilities that the children required. And so we carried out a gap analysis. What is it that we want to deliver? What is it that we currently don't deliver? And where on earth will it go? We're on a cramped 8-acre site, I should add, so that adds its own interesting dynamic. In addition to that, there will be opportunities which crop up, which we might need to take advantage of. So how do we factor those into the strategic planning of the college over and above the infrastructure plan? And then how do we ensure that we maximise our additional income stream and diversify our risk away from Brighton? Now, Brighton, as many of you will know, is actually quite a difficult catchment area. There's very little catchment in Brighton to the south. So we are dependent for about 80% of our business just on north and sort of half east, half west, and that felt a little bit precarious. So we focused on boarding to improve our ability to cater for more national children locally and also to cater for international children. We've opened schools overseas, which again diversifies our risk away from the UK somewhat. And now I think we're a major exporter in the area. And we actually put in infrastructure to try to increase donation income to support all of our intent. This is the campus. This is after the first master plan. There was an initial master plan. It looked at various things. The first thing it looked at was increasing capacity. Day houses to cater for the local children, and the boarding house. We kicked the headmaster off site and put 47 girls in his house. We felt it appropriate to do it that way round. But those weren't really major changes in buildings. We then introduced 2 new buildings, one to increase the educational space available and one also to allow this entry point at 11+, and then a pastoral one. We've been moving the staff common room from pillar to post. They ended up in the squash courts that Eric referred to earlier. It really wasn't conducive to an excellent body of teachers, and so we wanted to build something for them and as well for the children. We also wanted something that would reflect the architecture, which internally is flint and terracotta. Externally, it's also got red brick, Victorian red brick. But we wanted something that was contemporary. This was the building before. This was an arts building, and we wanted to create a DT block of this 11+ school. Not everyone likes this, but I think you could say it's a statement. And the black picks up the flint. And the chimney, I think, is a DT lab downstairs. The chimney, I think, actually, for me, reflects the William Blake dark satanic mill with the industrial bit going on in the bottom, as well as the building itself reflecting what's within. So that was the first building we put up under my tenure, and that got a Royal Institute British Architecture Award. The next area we looked at was our listed, adjacent to a listed building. This is the listed building. Here you see some single-storey asbestos-ridden groundsman's units, and we replaced that with the following, which I think you'll agree is an improvement. I hope you'll agree it's an improvement, otherwise we've not done our job properly. We've maintained the quad, which is now a performance space outside, but we've put in an incredibly attractive building mirroring the terracotta, so it picks up the terracotta, but it does so in a contemporary style, and Allies and Morrison helped us with this. And you can see that the gable end reflects the gable end of the boarding house adjacent. That was originally a site of a brewery some years ago. There's a theme developing, isn't there? Site of a brewery, and if you go into the staff common room, on a Friday night, you'll find they pay tribute to its original use. That's, I think, one of the best staff common rooms in the country from those that I've seen. That's our boardroom now on the top floor, and this is the cafe that's available to the children down below. And again, that's a wonderful space both for the children to enjoy, but also for marketing the school. And again, that won a REBA award and a Civic Trust award, so we're very proud of those. Finally, off campus, in terms of the recent developments, we are nestled in the South Downs. On a blustery day, you can imagine there's very little protection from the wind, and so we've put something up. This is the artist's impression, but the final building looks very much like that, although the green roof's not developed yet. And that enables us again to market to pre-prep feeder schools to provide something for existing parents. So those are the 3 buildings we've currently put up. And the impact of these has been to give the governors confidence to do other things. And while I've been at the school, we have acquired a new junior school, which enabled me to move our pre-prep off the main campus and free up an entire western flank for further development. There's now 220 children in this school, which is about 100 yards or 500 yards away from our front door, and that's for our youngest children, which is a bespoke facility. We've merged with a school in North Sussex that was underperforming, but under the new headmaster there, with our support, that's turned around. It needed about 230 children to break even. It was 186 when we got involved. It will have 306 next year, so it's gone from making £500,000 loss to £500,000 profit. And we've had the confidence to open overseas schools. This was the original impression that we wanted to create. Again, architecturally very important, something distinct but not a pastiche of what we've got here in the UK. And that's what was finally delivered. And you can see it's pretty much as intended. That's now got 900 pupils, which in itself would put it in roughly the top 100 schools in the UK. So we're very pleased with that. Moving the pre-prep off-site meant that I had to then invoke a new master plan, because suddenly we'd freed up an entire area of our campus. And so when it comes to planning, and this I guess is the strategic planning element, if you want to understand what it is that the client does, it's really the following, or what the client should do. And any clients here or schools here that haven't done it and are thinking about doing it, this is what I would advocate. Firstly, understand your own site. What areas are there for development? Try to leave spaces, prune rather than just build, because otherwise you end up with a series of buildings, all of which require maintenance, heat, light, etc. Determine your own need. For us, strategically, the needs were boarding. We had excess demand. I wanted to reduce the dependency on the local market. It also increases the number of donor options as well, because the overseas parents typically donate more than the English ones. I wanted to increase our day house capacity, create a new point of entry for the 11+. We wanted the improved pastoral spaces. We wanted to improve the spaces for marketing the school, and so for pre-prep feeders. We wanted also to bring music and drama onto site, because those are currently off-site about 100 yards away. We need to update our science facilities. We want to improve our pool and our strength and conditioning facilities. So those were our personal requirements. Now we needed to figure out how to do it in a cramped 8-acre campus. In addition to that, and Eric's alluded to this, we wanted to clarify the campus, look at hubs and axes, completely original Victorian vision maybe, pay tribute to that, albeit in a contemporary way, future-proof it, make it sustainable, and we're talking with a firm who are going to be putting boreholes in our campus so that we can power a lot of our own requirements. This was the campus that we inherited, or that I inherited. You can see it's like someone has taken a jigsaw puzzle, thrown it up in the air and just not really cared where it landed. All of the different colours on here represent different types of buildings. So blue is sort of pastoral, light blue is sort of boarding, pink is educational, green is sport, orange is sort of educational, yellow is educational. It just was a mess. And so we revisited the campus and thought, right, let's make it more faculty driven. So you've got a pastoral hub down in this corner on the left, sports on the right, teaching along the flank at the north, well, it's actually the west side, and then a performing arts hub in the middle. And we've been gradually putting our new sites together around that basic concept. That led us to identify 7 areas of need, and we're working on 3 of those at the moment. And the sort of areas of need were the tower. We'd like to do that. We'd only do that with donations, because it has no real educational sort of merit other than inspirational and confidence boosting. We're completing the quad. I'm going to have 70 new beds in ready for September. At least I'm assured we will have. Otherwise, I'll try to find homes for 70 13-year-old girls in Brighton, which will fill the parents with some dread, and me as well. That's fortunately well underway. You can see the shell there already in place, with the interior mirroring the new pastoral building on the other side of the quad with the high vaulted ceilings. And then we have the hub that Eric Parry's helping us to deliver. And we talked about clarifying axes and hubs. Hubs I was talking about, these are the axes. You can see there's the northwest axis that runs through is now clear because of Eric's design. We've got the main east-west axis and a subsidiary east-west axis opened up as a result of this scheme. So we're really, really pleased with what Eric's delivered for us. And we've already seen these pictures, which is the site before, which has absolutely no view of this gable end of a beautiful Gilbert Scott building, or what could be. And yes, that was the site we saw before, and that's the site that it will be. And interestingly, we've had architects already referring to this as the Parry range. So I don't know, Eric, if you're aware of this, but we've got a Gilbert Scott range, we've got a Jackson range, and now, or imminently, we'll have a Parry range. So there we are. Round of applause. And some beautiful views as well. In addition to the master planning, then it's also important to project manage each individual plan. And what we do is we spend a lot of time scoping the requirements. And to do that, we involve the heads of department. They always say they want something that's far bigger than they really need. So we sense check it and kick them around a bit. We go and visit other schools. We don't restrict ourselves just to schools. We look at universities, we look at other types of areas as well, just to see what best practice might look like. We determine a brief, but aren't so prescriptive that the architect can't work its magic. And then we try to ensure that we have the right resource in place to deliver it. And as an illustrative process, I would spend typically 6 months just thinking about a building if I have the opportunity. And then a month shortlisting from a long list of architects who I know could probably deliver what I want by virtue of the fact they've done things at other schools. We meet with those architects. We go down to usually somewhere between 3 and 5, depending on the nature of the site, for a shortlist, and we ask them to produce a design outline for us, typically with a model that's to a scale we dictate, so 1 to 500 if it's a very large part of the campus they're developing, 1 to 250 if not. That gives us an opportunity to gauge the various alternatives. And then you decide on the architect after a period of clarification. It's usually a unanimous decision. Certainly when Eric looked at music, it was a unanimous decision to go ahead with Eric. Sometimes it's not, obviously engenders some entertaining debates. And then we typically allow up to 2 years to finalise the planning before we start construction. However, you'll see just at the bottom here 2 recent timelines. Poor Eric has been working with us for far longer than you probably like. By the time we finish his building, it'll be about 4 years, 7 months since the start of that process has elapsed. By contrast, Allies and Morrison have got away with it lightly. There's 1 year, 7 months since we decided we needed to do boarding as an imperative. I thought it might be helpful just to blow Eric's trumpet, because I know that he's not very good at doing that himself. And so just why did we choose Eric Parry? What did we look at? Site strategy. So massing, was it respectful to our existing range? And this is, I suppose, useful for any other architects. What is it that the client might consider? The bulk, the interaction with the other spaces around the college. Did it fulfill the brief? We had some lovely areas. We also had some areas that weren't so great, and but with dialogue we've got them great. We looked at materials, sustainability, the footprint, the costs, all the usual stuff that you need to operate effectively, phasing, and the other consultants that Eric introduced. We've got Paul Guilleron and Andy Hales here today, also experts in their field, very impressed with them. So all of that made it for us a unanimous decision. And if I were to give any advice, and I don't really feel qualified because I've only been doing this for 4 years, but if I were to give any advice to anybody or anyone to ask what it is that makes project management master planning a success in a school environment, I'd suggest this. You do need someone on the board who understands buildings. We are very fortunate to have Neville Abraham. He founded the Chez Girard chain. He's therefore used to putting up buildings, rolling out chains. He's a very, very useful sponsor for us. You need a vision. We've got a very visionary headmaster, Richard Cairns. He knows what he wants for academic delivery, and we just go ahead and do it. You need the right team, and we have some fantastic individuals within the college. We've recruited to fill spaces. I've got a very good project director who runs my projects. He monitors, keeps abreast of it all, understands the costs, understands the programme, doesn't let anyone get away with it. Very importantly, as the architect, we have done things with design and build, negotiated tender where we've had to novate the architect. It's important if you're going to novate an architect that they will stay true to their design and not compromise the original vision, and we are really keen therefore to ensure A, the architect understands our vision, but B, that they will also safeguard it as it goes through its construction phase. I think realistic timeframes go without saying, as do budgets. We talked also about knocking listed buildings down or trying to muck around with them. For me, I've spent the last 4 years trying to build a relationship with the local council, with the Regency Society, with English Heritage, with others, to understand their agenda. Interestingly, I've got the individual who actually listed a lot of Brighton's assets working for me, so he can have a very sensible discussion with the council saying, actually, this isn't an important one. And if you can find the individual that's listed them originally, that gives you a lot of clout, so that was quite helpful. It's not what you know. And the fire officer, I mean, he's very important, especially with boarding. He can just shut us down in an instant. So again, making certain you've got working relationships is critical. I've mentioned our strong in-house project director. That's critical for me because I can't do all the things like opening schools overseas, merging, acquiring freeholds over there, opening up a free school as I did this year in London, unless I've got someone I can rely on to deliver the buildings. I'd liaise early with the contractors, A, just to firm up on costs, but also just to get a sense of where they're coming from, how secure they may be, and in particular, meet with the project manager, their project manager. We had one really bad project manager, and it caused all sorts of problems. So I take reference checks, I make certain the one we meet's the one we get, and that's the way that I diligence that area. If you get the good project manager, usually the project then sort of sorts itself out. And finally, it goes without saying, as a resprayed accountant, that one also ought to ensure that you can pay for whatever it is you're building. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm happy to take questions, I suspect, with the rest of the panel in due course, but I'll leave you, in the meantime, with the Eric Parry range and a few other assorted odds and sods around our campus. Many thanks.